Good evening, everyone, and welcome to SocialFlight Live. I'm Jeff Simon. We have such a fun show for you this evening. Andrew Barker is here. I love Andrew. It's going to be a lot of fun learning about his history, the history of TruTrak, autopilots, all sorts of other stuff, and the amazing work that he is doing now over at Honeywell with their urban mobility stuff. Before we get started, a few things. First of all, I want to thank everybody for all that they do to support SocialFlight. Be sure to check out SocialFlight.com and the free SocialFlight mobile apps for Apple and Android devices. We have tens of thousands of aviation events happening. There are live events. There are events that you can fly to, destinations. If you're looking for the $100 hamburger, just get the app or the web, SocialFlight.com, and it's all there for you completely free. We are here to support you. That's why we created the app. And in addition to that, we're at the end of our prize period right now. From Tempest Aero, we have a complete prize pack from them of aircraft supplies. It is so cool. That ends at midnight in that challenge. That's midnight in January 31st. So be sure that you get out there, get the app, do one flight. That's all it takes. You're entered to win, and you could win from that prize pack. And then we're going to have another cool prize period starting right after that. It's all here to support you. And one of the things we decided to do, and I mentioned this last week, is to come up with a way to also make it easier for some of you to help support SocialFlight so it can be here for everyone. And so we created a customized gift that I want to show you. We showed this last week, but now we have lowered the price point on it. So we have this. I'll put my hand behind it so that you can see it. This actually is a customized stand and a 3D engraved globe of a very famous P-51 Mustang, Glamorous Glenn III. It is incredibly detailed, and this is available for $49.95, gets displayed over to you, comes in this really beautiful gift box. Again, we lowered the price so that more people can participate here and credited anyone who already participated. It's $49.99. All you have to do is send an email to info@socialflight.com. That is it, info@socialflight.com. Send that email off. We'll send you a link. We have a limited number of these because we only made a small number in order to have a little gift for everybody around the holiday season. We'll get them shipped right out to you. So with that, I would like to bring Andrew on here. Andrew Barker, he he started at the University of Arkansas as a student with a passion for aviation, and he was the first employee at autopilot maker TruTrak Flight Systems back in 2000, 22 years ago, although I don't want to date him for that. But, you know, I absolutely love his story. He rose through the ranks at TruTrak all the way to the top of the company, worked there, created some of the most amazing things to support general aviation and autopilots, and then sold the company over to Honeywell and continued all of that work in Honeywell. He's been named in some famous lists of 40 under 40. I am absolutely thrilled to call him a close friend. I'm going to bring him online now. Absolutely thrilled that Andrew's a friend of mine, and even more excited that he is here to join us tonight on SocialFlight Live. Welcome, Andrew. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
So first of all, of course, thanks for being on the show. When I think of these people who are inspirational personalities in general aviation that you walk around a show like Sun and Fun or Air Venture in Oshkosh, and you just recognize them instantly. Man, you are right up there at the top of the list.
Well, maybe not today. I don't have my cowboy hat on.
I was going to say, no cowboy. I can't see a cowboy hat and a cowboy boots. That's about the only difference.
That's right. That's it.
So take me back and tell everyone. I told a little bit about your story, but how you got this passion, how you got involved in aviation, and then took it on with such gusto.
You know, getting into aviation was an accident actually for me. I grew up around aviation. My dad was a pilot and used his construction business as an excuse that he needed to fly. He was building restaurants, you know, within 2 or 3 or 4 hours from home driving. And so that was his excuse. He had to have an airplane. He got to get back and forth to the job. So I just kind of grew up around it, and certainly enjoyed it. It certainly spoke to me, but I didn't ever expect to do it. So I got my private when I was 17, and then shortly thereafter started to work at TruTrak, and that was really, honestly, that's really what kind of drew me in. Was Jim Youngkin took me under his wing and said, here's an autopilot business. I don't know what you're planning to do after college, but you can learn a little bit about autopilots and have fun in aviation. And that really kind of started that fire even more for me.
So your background was mechanical engineering at that time. Your first job you're offered is at an aviation company, and you had that tie from your dad doing what we all love to do if you can do the business expense of flying.
Exactly. Yeah, it's there's kind of an interesting tie-in. My dad's actually the reason I got the job. He knew Jim, of course. He actually had built Jim's machine shop for him in the late 60s. And they were having breakfast one day, and Jim said to my dad, he goes, "Hey, I hear that Andrew's pretty good at drafting. You think he'd like a job?" And that's how it started.
Wow, that's awesome. So what was it like then to start to learn the inside of kind of an avionics business? I mean, you and I both have a shared background in
Right.
avionics from the creator, from the manufacturing side of it. What was it like jumping into that?
Honestly, it felt so natural because TruTrak was an infant at that time. So I was learning all these things as we were doing them for the first time. So it was so much easier than stepping into a fully operational, fully functioning aviation company for me. So literally when TruTrak was having all of its first, they were firsts for me at the same time. So it felt really natural for me to kind of go through that progression within the company. You know, it's a really, really cool thing for me to get to say that I literally have done every single job within the company. I didn't write a whole lot of software. Let's be very clear there. But other than writing software, I did every job quite a bit.
And I mean, so you're learning that. At what point did you actually get your license and start taking on the understanding the pilot side?
So I actually got my private when I turned 17, just right after my 17th birthday. So 2 years prior to starting at TruTrak.
Oh, so you were already a pilot at that time?
I was, yep. I already had my private.
That's great because you went in there basically having some ideas of what you would want as a pilot out of their products.
Yeah, and it's because of that aviation background history with me and Oshkosh. It's I grew up going to Oshkosh. That was family vacation every summer for literally as long as I can remember. I think I've missed that. You know, my daughter says that last year or 2 years ago, whatever it was, she says that doesn't count as a missed year. So I've missed 3 in my life.
Wow,
So we'll say this is 39 Oshkoshes for me. 38 Oshkoshes.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love it that, there's so many families, I think, and ours included, that Oshkosh is your big, that's your big summer vacation, or at least that's one of them.
That's right. That's right.
And you look forward to it every year, and everyone you meet there is kind of like all part of that family.
They absolutely are family. I have some of the greatest friends in the world that are Oshkosh friends and Sun and Fun friends, and absolutely the best friends.
So help me on the timeline of moving kind of up more and more with Jim to take over the business there, to rise through other ranks, and then how that kind of dovetailed in with this change of only being experimental to starting to the revolution that happened for autopilots for regular aircraft.
It's a really fun story for me. So I started telling Jim and Chuck really early on, probably 3 or 4 years into the company. So by early 2000, 2002, 2003, because I was talking to the customers. I was doing almost all of the customer support side. And of course I was becoming well known from, meeting people in the booth and stuff like that. So I talked to everyone and I saw the need. I saw the demand for an affordable certified autopilot. Now, the FAA hadn't yet determined that was going to be a possibility because of the way that the TruTrak autopilot was done, just like the way the Dynon D10 and several other products, and the Trio autopilots as well. So once we started to see that kind of the winds of change where we were going to be able to use ASTM standards, that kind of started with LSA. So once LSA became, a real thing, and we use the ASTM standards for that, then it made sense that maybe we can start using ASTM standards for other things in general aviation, not just in the LSA world. And that's really where that fire got started. And then EAA and Dynon partnered together to get the D10A certified. And that's really, and before that happened, I had kind of set TruTrak on that pathway, and I'm jumping through a lot of years here. But that really started for me in the early 2000s, and started telling Jim and Chuck, okay, this is something we're going to do one day. And they always said that they weren't interested in doing that. And so that kind of became a fire for me. That was, okay, I'm going to watch this, and I'm going to take every opportunity I have to position TruTrak so that it can one day be certified, and basically fully expecting one day to end up taking over the company.
Wow, that's pretty bold.
Well, it wasn't like a hostile takeover. It wasn't a hostile takeover. So, Jim and Chuck had always kind of expected and planned for me to be the next generation of the TruTrak autopilots. And so it just happened that they didn't really want to get into the certification stuff. And when the time came to do that, then I had to be the one to really go in, to go all in to make that happen.
Right. And I think for a lot of people, they may not recognize how significant these recent changes are that we consider very recent, for whether it be autopilots or whether it be looking at other avionics in the panel. I mean, 15 years ago, I guess probably less, right? 10 years ago, this was unthought of. I mean, the idea of certifying things was just so painful and so expensive that it ruined companies like who attempted
Absolutely. It was something that I worked on in the background for many years, through ASTM stuff and through the Part 23 rewrite and all that sort of good stuff, and learning the process. And there's several projects we did along the way at TruTrak that taught me a lot of the things that we would need to do to get through certification. And so I kind of had a feeling of what we really needed to do when that time came. But that catalyst really just started just 4 or 5 years ago with EAA and Dynon really taking that bold jump and doing the D10A as a commercial part.
And so that was the trigger then that started. When did you jump in from an autopilot perspective? Because you mentioned the D10A, so for everybody out there, most people know about it, but the D10A being Dynon's small multifunction display, kind of attitude indicator, and the idea that someone would take a non-certified product and make it okay to put in a panel was heresy, and then all of a sudden they're working on it. And it would think like the idea of jumping immediately in and saying, hey, as long as you guys are considering doing this thing that everybody considers to be like minor, well, hell, let's control the autopilot.
We might as well, right?
Yeah.
If we're gonna take a jump, let's be bold and take a jump.
So what was it like getting that ball rolling? What was involved in that?
So EAA was a wonderful partner in making this happen. Total honesty, I don't think it would have been able to happen without EAA and their work on the Hill in DC and all of the, there's 3 pieces really there. It wasn't just the product or the production pedigrees. It was really to get in there and show the FAA, hey, look, here's a product that's been selling in this market for this many years, has this many flight hours on it, and here's the processes we use within this company already. And the realization that companies like TruTrak and Dynon and Trio and even Garmin with the G3X, right? Those companies were already doing a lot of the certified processes within the companies because we needed to be able to have reproducible things, and we needed to have good production capabilities. So a lot of those things were already there. To be honest, we just didn't know that we knew a lot of the things that we needed to know. I know that's a really weird statement there, but so EAA really helped kind of open that door. And then there were a lot of meetings, of course, between EAA and TruTrak and Dynon and the FAA and Trio and AOPA. And there were just so many people that really just got together, and we had all the right people in all the right places from the top of the FAA all the way through the org, for sure.
I think
Michael Huerta was just a huge fan of getting some affordable, life-saving, safety-enhancing technologies into GA. He was such a huge friend for that.
Do you think there was a little bit of a connection between this and when the FAA was moving towards NORC, which was the regulations for for non-required safety enhancing equipment, which, you know, anything that could increase safety, it was like, well, we'll start lowering the bar for some things that can do that. I think it's fascinating. Do you think that had some impact?
Absolutely, absolutely. North Sea was probably an earlier catalyst in that process, probably a less visible one,
Hmm.
but certainly was a huge catalyst in that really making that all happen.
I think one of the things which I think has helped us recently has been the biggest change I have seen in attitude from the FAA is this idea that that we can enhance safety through relaxing regulations.
Right, and it's I certainly agree with you, and that's probably a little more of a headwind these days than it was even just a few years ago. There are still some really big voices in the FAA that are helping push that forward, but it is a
Hmm.
little more of a headwind now because of the things like the Max 8 and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the FAA is just so busy, and of course, COVID doesn't help anything with availability of people and all that sort of good stuff. So there's certainly a little more headwind now than there was 2 or 3 years ago, but
Hmm.
there's still certainly a big culture of these things are doing good things and let's see more of it.
We've heard that in other cases as well. George Brawley was on the show recently talking about
Mm-hmm.
alternative fuels and some challenges,
Yep.
and it almost seems as if in any revolution you get a pendulum swing one way, and then there's a little bit of a pushback the other way. Some people
Yep.
who maybe resisted it and got rolled over the first time feel like feel like this is their chance to get a few words in and moderate things, but I'm hoping that we're still on the same path.
We really are, and you're absolutely correct. The pendulum swung, yeah, it was pretty far up there to be able to get all of those technologies in. And it swings back just a little bit. But the good thing is that all of the companies that are utilizing that pathway could handle that pendulum swing back. And because the processes were already there, it was, oh, okay, let's go over here and double check this. And let's look over here and let's revise this manual just a little bit more to make this a little bit more clear and stuff like that. So, it's, and one of the things that we really said early on was this isn't a problem. We'll know there'll be other things that we'll need to do later on. We have processes in place to do that, both within our organization and within the FAA, of course.
Right. I mean, one of the hopes is that the track record speaks for itself to some degree, that we get to a
Yes.
point that we can look back and say, look, we want to push that pendulum again,
Right.
and can we use this as proof? That I think that's the same approach basic med or other things are. Can we do like a 3-year look back and say, guys, there's no aircraft falling from the skies the way that you
Right.
might have been concerned, or quite the opposite.
Right. Yeah, exactly right.
What are you
And
thinking is the future for this type of autopilot technology that you worked on at TruTrak?
that's a tough question. So it's difficult. So I think the concepts behind it are still certainly very valid and will certainly be used in other things going forward. Personally, I think the day of the standalone autopilot, as a standalone autopilot designer for 20 years, I think the day of the standalone autopilot is probably not in its prime. Not to say anything negative there, but of course you've got a huge retrofit market there. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these aircraft are going to go to glass one of these days, right? They won't
Hmm.
all, so there'll always be some retrofit out there. But using the certification pathways that we used and the knowledge we learned from that to bring affordable glass that has integrated autopilot built in, like what Dynon's doing with the Skyview HDX, and what Garmin's done with the G3X, and what Aspen's done. Now they don't have the integrated autopilot in there, but the Aspen series products and all those sort of things, they're utilizing a lot of those same pathways that we're utilizing. Bendix King's using those same pathways as
Hmm.
well. So a lot of that's being used now. It's not just for standalone pieces. It's now for more and more integrated, more capable systems. I think that's where we see it kind of going.
That makes sense. I think a lot of people also have questions about what is the difference between that kind of I don't know if it's correct to call it a simpler form of autopilot, and
Sure.
some of the higher end systems from a variety of companies that are not just made for bigger aircraft, but theoretically more capable or
Right.
something like that. What marks the difference between those, that first level of autopilot and that second level?
But there's a big mark difference. You absolutely touched on it, not with necessarily the autopilot capability, but more with the mission of the aircraft. So if you're a VFR pilot or an occasional instrument pilot, then something like the TruTrak or the Trio are great products for that. If you're a pilot that's flying IMC all day, every day, you're going to want an autopilot that's capable of flying VOR, localizer, ILS, fully coupled approaches. And while the TruTrak and the Trios can do your more simple approaches, they can do a GPS approach, of course, but they can't fly an approach in everywhere, down to minimums and all those sorts of things. So if you need an autopilot and you're going to be relying on it all day, every day, and what you're going to do, that's when you're really going to step up into those higher level of certitude systems.
Mhm.
Now, does it make it a better autopilot? No, not necessarily, but it
It
certainly is tested in more areas for sure.
that makes sense. I think the question that comes to mind is, so if we contain the discussion aside from bigger airplanes, but we
Right.
focus mainly on the mission that you mentioned, um, why not? What we haven't seen is we've seen you take all this great like technology and apply innovation and cheaper product and cheaper ways of manufacturing it and all these other things to create the autopilot that can fly GPS, but like you said, maybe not go to minimums or maybe not do
Right.
VOR or ILS. And then the only other alternative is the kind of classic, super expensive big
Right.
boys.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity here to take ASTM standards, to take the same approach you took with those lower end autopilots, but apply it and create a middle level, apply it and say, hey, here's one that does all those things that you can use for a serious IFR pilot in a Cessna, Piper, Bonanza, and does it at 25% of the cost, because right now we've got this group at $5,000, I think, or something like that, and
Yeah.
this or less, and this group at $25,000, and the only
Correct.
difference is that approach.
You're absolutely correct. There really should be, and there is. I 100% believe there is a middle ground opportunity for a, call it a $10,000 to $15,000 autopilot that that has that pedigree required to really get through and be able to fly a fully coupled approach down to minimums. Because honestly, that's really what it boils down to, is flying in more difficult, more challenging environments that are closer to the ground, where you have less reaction times for the pilot. So the autopilots have to be tested to a lot higher standards.
Mm. And then also have the options, I guess, even if you're not getting all the way down, but to have the other integration with radio navigation, things like that.
Correct. Correct. Adding analog coupling to it, not a huge deal these days, because most of the GPSs can digitize that and send it out. It
Mhm.
would just be a uh, it would just be a new autopilot design, and not a terribly difficult one to do, honestly. If you took
Mhm.
the TruTrak as it exists today and add a couple more airing channels and a little more programming capability, yeah, you're pretty much there.
Yeah,
But it's 4 years away to
yeah.
get there. Truthfully, I mean, it would be a 4 year project to get there.
Interesting. Interesting. And how many emails to you would it take for I know you're
And you're
on.
going to give out my
Well, look,
personal email address at the end of this, right?
no, I'm not going to do that to you, but I'll tell you, my name would be on the list. My email would be in your email inbox within 2 seconds, except the price point would be under 10 without a doubt.
Well, so honestly, I would love to do it. It would be a really fun project, and it would really be enjoyable for me to do. I think there's opportunities to get there, but I think probably the best opportunity is integrating it within other products to get that
Mhm.
capability.
Yeah, it would
So
seem with the
I'd
track
rather give
record.
you a $20,000 piece of glass and an autopilot that can do that
Uh-huh.
than a $10,000 autopilot and a $15,000 piece of glass.
Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. I hope there's also maybe something to be gained eventually where, back to the track record, when we have so many flight hours and you can sit there and go, look, people are flying down to this point. Maybe they're not going down to minimums, and there's no accidents related to it happening
Right.
incorrectly. Can we get the FAA to say, all right, so can we get credit for another couple hundred feet or something like that?
Credit is absolutely something. Once you have a certified product, you do get credit for time and service for sure. So it does open up those capabilities of bringing the minimums down and approving other things. So yeah, there's absolutely possibilities of that.
Absolutely. That's awesome. All right, I want to switch and show a few things because I want to get also because not only, of course, without the cowboy hat, you're still a colorful person, but I want to get the colorful pictures and show a couple things here and get the stories. One of the things I love is that you started with an RV4, you and your wife Carrie, and it seems like this was a foundation of so many things that were your experience and led through it. Tell me a little bit about that.
So this so this specific picture, I'll talk a little bit about this picture and then about the history behind the airplane. So this picture is in Johnson Creek, Idaho. Carrie and I had gone to an RV fly-in in Hot Springs, South Dakota. That was Larry Vetterman's fly-in. We had taken off. Grandma had our daughter. I don't think our son was even born yet at this time. So Maddie was alive, and I think Grandma had her. And I think actually that was Carrie's first trip away
Oh,
from Maddie. So we loaded the RV4 with me and Carrie and the camping gear. So those of you that know the RV4 know that it's not huge on baggage space. So I told Carrie that her clothes bag could weigh 12 pounds. And then the camping gear went in, so with the tent and the chairs and all that sort of good stuff. And of course, this was all backpacking, really lightweight stuff. But so we took off and we went to Larry Vetterman's and spent a couple of days there. Now we hoteled on that one. And then we went on and camped in Idaho for 3 or 4 nights. And then Carrie took her on out to Washington State to see some family. So we did almost a 2-week total trip in the RV4. Just the two of us and camping, and it was a really fun. That was our first real road trip in the airplane.
that's awesome. And you know that I've got a soft spot for family builds of airplanes, and I know you kind of bought a kit in progress.
Yep.
And tell me a little bit first about going and getting it, and then what that process was like, because you're still married after this.
Yeah, well, as far as I know, I haven't seen any papers in the mail lately. So we bought the RV4. So it was actually my dad and I's project originally. We bought it from a friend of a friend that had passed away, and it was probably about quick build stage, maybe a little bit past that. But we bought the kit, and it was in Idaho actually, and we lived in Arkansas at the time. And so Dad and I, this was in May. We hopped in his motorhome and took a 16-foot trailer, not an enclosed trailer, a flatbed trailer, and we took off to go pick up the airplane in Idaho. We got to Denver, I guess, and got snowed in there for a day or two, and then went on out and picked up the airplane. And so we get there and we look at the airplane, and there's about twice as much stuff as we expected there to be. There's all these tools, and there's this huge crate full of other parts. There's an engine core, and the fuselage is not on the gear, but it's far enough along that we put the gear legs on it because we needed it for spacing. And so we ended up with the fuselage, I seem to recall fuselage backwards on the trailer. So tail pointing forward, right? Sitting on top of this crate, and then all the tools and engine and all this stuff on this 16-foot flatbed trailer. And we're headed back to Arkansas. Looked like probably we belonged in Arkansas, but
every kid riding behind you having a blast.
Well, it was very interesting. So we're going through Montana, and my dad says, son, I don't think I'm ever going to get another chance to see Yellowstone, so let's detour. He's like, you got a couple extra days. I'm like, well, heck yeah, let's go. So we turn off, and there we go, down through Yellowstone, down to Old Faithful with the motorhome, which isn't such a huge deal, but then with the big trailer and the airplane in tow. So we're stopping at all the little sites along the way, going down through Yellowstone and everything. And I've got some of those pictures. I didn't get them located in time to send them over today, but certainly some great memories there and picking up the airplane. And then Carrie and I ended up finishing it over the next many years, but
That's
such
awesome.
a fun project.
And for anyone who's ever gone and spent some time in Yellowstone or watched an old I Love Lucy, the idea of you in a big motorhome with a long trailer behind and an airplane on it going through the switchbacks at the cliff's edge of some of those, that must have been amazing.
It was nerve-wracking. I had luckily gotten quite a bit of hours in the motorhome with trailer prior to that, and somehow it managed to be my leg in Yellowstone. So
The blame leg. Yeah, exactly.
exactly. Hey, you know what? We made it out. All the tires stayed on the road all the way, so no worries.
That's awesome. So I've got another picture here because you've evolved to not having to tell your wife that she's got 12 pounds that she could take.
So this is our RV10 and my son Jamin. This is at Weddington Woods. We've got a hangar. Hangar's just behind me in this photo, probably mom, I'm guessing. But so the RV10 was actually the test bed for TruTrak. This is what all the TruTrak autopilots were really developed in the later years. In the earlier years, we had an RV9A that we developed in, and before that, it was actually done in a twin Comanche. So this is kind of the third generation aircraft, but it's the one that we had for the most amount of time. So this became our family, kind of family truckster, as I lovingly call it. It's in the process right now of being completely remodeled. It's got a new engine, new prop, new interiors in process, new panels in process, and then it'll end up with new paint. So it'll be a brand new airplane here in the next year or so if we can ever get all the parts together.
What about this mod?
So this is probably the most popular mod I've ever done to an airplane. This is one that we did for the Pendulum RV fly-in. That's one of my favorite fly-ins to go to. It's in Pendulum, Arkansas, every October, November timeframe. And I always took some local Northwest Arkansas beer down there. And one year I decided, you know what, I'm going to stop bringing it in growlers, and we're just going to put a tap on the side of the airplane. So this is my handiwork on a mod. So there's a false door. Obviously, the black door there is a false door that just kind of slides in and then locks in place. And then behind the back seat in there is a keg, and we built a cooler for it out of a insulated trash barrel, so we could pour ice around it and keep the keg cool and keep it for about 3 days and keep the CO2 on it. And we'd usually go through two or three pony kegs there at that RV fly-in, just advertising for TruTrak.
Okay, so the only thing I would have loved is if you had a little bit of blue dye in that when that came out there.
I should have been able to convince the beer folks to do that at the breweries. That would have been fun. High octane beer, of course.
Exactly. Little shout out to our friend Brian Turner doing his videos drinking out of a sample cup. So that would have been awesome. But if you want to talk about a mod for an aircraft, that's a really, really good one. I may steal that for you when Mustang finally makes it out of here.
Definitely do.
I like that. I want to show something else here too, and that is both of your adorable little ones here. At the controls of something that is not an RV.
Yeah, that's a Cessna 120 that we owned for a handful of years. Both kids got quite a bit of time in that airplane and had a lot of fun in it. And this is some family pictures that we had in it. Maddie, my oldest, she turns 12 here on Saturday, actually now. She is the one closest to us. And then Jamin, we call him J Sky. Jamin is the one over on the far side there, and they are both my best little co-pilots for sure.
Oh, that's absolutely awesome. And you told me there's something going on here with it, because this is classic from the old Mixmaster.
Yep, that is. So that is at Oshkosh. You can see 8.3 of 97. So this is where it all really started for me. We got that Skymaster in 86 and had it through 2000 or something like that. Maybe it was 99. When Dad sold it and when he quit flying. But that was it. That was the original family truckster. Everywhere we went, that Skymaster took us. So Oshkosh, every year as long as I can remember, you can see there's a widgeon there next to it in the picture. That was part of the original family gang at Oshkosh. When we talked about the family, the friends that become family at Oshkosh, there are people that I'm still in touch with that I met when I was 12 or 13 years old, at Oshkosh, and I still see them at Oshkosh almost every year. It's so
Oh my,
cool.
that is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Antonov AN2. Yep. There's another fun one for sure. So I think that's Maddie probably there sitting in front of it. Yep. Um, Antonov AN2, we did a custom autopilot for that aircraft. We had a project that a customer bought several autopilots and needed a custom autopilot that could fly the AN2. And so we built a highly customized servo that actually became the kind of the backbone for the servo that ended up being our certified servo. They're all based on the same stepper motor technology, but the mods we did for the AN2, essentially we took one gear pass off of that, and that's what ended up being our certified servo. So it's it was a very important link in the certified TruTrak chain for sure. So
let's get technical again for a second, because you brought something up that's really important, and that is that the servos that you worked on, they were stepper motor servos. I think one of the interesting evolutions in all of these autopilots is that it used to be that there had to be feedback loops in the way that as to where how the servo was operating, meaning
right.
For people that are listening, like knowing a feedback of a tachometer signal or something similar to that what's happening with movement of the servo when you give it power, that's changed a lot with the recent technologies, at least for some autopilots. Can you tell me a little bit about that, how TruTrak does it, and what you think the future holds for autopilot technology?
So the TruTrak Autopilot is a velocity drive servo. So we don't position drive it. We drive it at a velocity. And we let the aircraft close that feedback loop. So we let the gyros in the autopilot. We've got rate gyros in the autopilot. We let those gyros sense the movement of the aircraft. And if the movement's not what we expect, then we give the servo more velocity accordingly, right? So all that's really built in. It makes a really, really, really simple inner loop to the autopilot, where you essentially have one or two gains to adjust to fly essentially any aircraft. And so it is probably a more difficult starting point for an autopilot in a lot of cases, especially when you're a tinkerer like Jim Youngkin was to really design that. He didn't sit down and do like today's designers do and design the loops and everything out on a piece of paper, right? Jim goes in and he's like, all right, intuition tells me we need a gain of this, and then, oh, that wasn't enough, so double the gain. Oh, so on and so forth. So Jim was a really brilliant autopilot guy, but not one that could sit down and really design an autopilot out on paper, right? I mean, he could, but not the way that we do it today, honestly. So like with MATLAB or something like that, right? So it's a really different way to do it, but that velocity drive servo makes us have a very, very simple servo. We don't, like you said, we don't have a feedback pot or attack in the autopilot servo. So it basically is freewheeling. So a lot of people, when they install the servo, they'll ask, right? Oh, do I need to clock the arm or anything like that? And it's no, you just put it in and hook it up. And the only negative to that is when you engage the autopilot on the ground, if you don't know what you're looking at and you command something on the autopilot and you see it go to the stop and then, bang off the stops, then you think, oh my gosh, something's wrong with the autopilot. But no, it's just not getting that velocity feedback because the aircraft isn't moving.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, and what does it mean, velocity feedback?
So we command a velocity of the servo rather than a position. Most autopilots, not all, but most autopilots today, they'll drive the servo to a position. So for a given input from the autopilot, from the position feedback, you'll move the control surfaces to a corresponding position. Where in the TruTrak Autopilot, I don't care what the position is, I'm going to drive it at a certain velocity. So if a wing dips, I'm going to get my hands up here so I can fly my hands a little bit. So if a wing dips fast, right, a wing drops, you drop in a whole lot of velocity to correct it. So you get a rapid response in the ailerons to pick that wing up. But if you get a small, an azimuth input, then you have a lesser or delayed response in the aileron roll in. So you get a smaller velocity there. So we kind of command correspondingly based on what the aircraft is doing. So if it's a slow drop, then you're going to drop with, you're going to input less velocity, essentially.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And then another thing which has always been challenging with any type of autopilot system is all of the effects of cable tensions and friction in the system and friction with control surfaces, which can vary all over the place. Does that approach kind of negate that?
It doesn't necessarily by its, by being a velocity servo, but what does help negate that is the fact that the majority of our installations do utilize push rod drive rather than a capstan and a cable drive. So if there's a bell crank or something like that that we can drive with the autopilot servo, we will always choose that because it gives you more direct and tighter control of the aircraft. It's like maybe some of the people on the show have driven an old pickup where you've got to bounce the steering wheel back and forth through the deadband, right? Because there's lost motion in the system. So if you could go and drive directly at the front wheels with a servo, then you're going to have tighter control of those wheels than if you're driving through multiple different gear trains getting back to the steering wheel. So we kind of do that same thing with the TruTrak Autopilot. We'll try to drive directly out of bell crank or something like that. So a lot of times we'll drive an aileron bell crank directly or something like that. Now there are some installations where you can't do that, and we do the best we can in those situations. And there's other things we can do in software to help with that cable tension stuff. But it is certainly an issue that we do run into quite regularly in the certified market because they're all cable drive aircraft, whereas in the experimental, they're really almost all push rod.
Got it. And do you see, I mean, again, this technology has changed a lot. Servos used to be extremely expensive to build with, like I said, tachometers, all these different feedback loops. What do you think the future actually holds for autopilot as a technology, just across, if you were to look at 10 years from now, or in aviation terms, 20, for any manufacturer, what do you think will prevail?
Depends on the segment of aviation that you're speaking, first of all. And it also depends on the approach the company decides to take. So an autopilot servo at TruTrak, to us, it made sense for us to make the least intelligent servo we possibly could, so that all the intelligence was in the autopilot controller and the servos could do nothing on their own. But when you go to a fully integrated system like a Dynon or a Garmin or something like that, where you've got a screen and all of your interfacing to the autopilot is through that screen, the autopilot's in a lot of cases actually not contained in that screen. It's contained now actually in the autopilot servos.
Oh,
so
really?
You can have all of the intelligence of the autopilot in the servo, and then you're just feeding the autopilot commands. Okay, you're a roll servo, and here's the attitude of the aircraft. Go do your thing. So it kind of depends on the approach you want to take there. Either approach is very valid, and there's value in both approaches. I don't know that one is necessarily right or wrong. In the days when horsepower and things like that to drive them, so when we didn't have the processing speeds that we do now and chips were more expensive, although I can't really say much about chips these days, we can't get any, but that's a totally different issue. When horsepower was really expensive to get, it made sense to have less less microprocessors in the avionics. Well, now they're not as expensive, so having more in a lot of cases is actually beneficial. So spreading that out and saying, okay, I'm going to compute all of the information in this one place, and then everybody else is going to take that information as they need it for whatever function they're doing. Whether you're a display or a glass display or a HUD or an autopilot servo or a trim servo or any of those sorts of things, you don't necessarily have to have all that intelligence locked in that one place. So everyone kind of does their own job.
That's fascinating.
It can work either way.
Yeah, that it really is fascinating. I haven't thought about it that way, but it's, we use data buses to basically say this is where in aircraft where this is the attitude of the aircraft, this is what's going on with the motion of the aircraft, and to just command it and to put the intelligence at the servo point and just say you're going to add the module. You're going to add a yaw module. All you do is yaw. Here you go, and here's your data line to tell you what the airplane's doing. That's an interesting approach.
Yep. Now, I will say that when we were convincing the FAA that this approach was a good approach, I relied heavily on the fact that our servos were really stupid and knew nothing and could do nothing on their own. Now, I think I could probably sell the other way as well, but that way worked really well for us at TruTrak.
That's right. You gotta craft your argument for the audience you're talking to.
That's right.
And then you can tell everybody else they're really smart. Uh,
We were so smart, we made our servo stupid. That's what I always like to tell everyone.
I like that. I like that a lot. So let's transition a little bit because you've moved to a new role that is just totally poised to revolutionize travel as we know it. I mean, there's so much talk out there about what's happening in urban mobility, in
Yeah.
UAS systems, unmanned systems, um, and who knows, what the future will actually hold when all the excitement really boils down to real products.
Right.
Tell us what you're doing right now.
So starting in July of this year, I joined our urban air mobility and unmanned aerial systems team, and I run the sales and marketing for that group within Honeywell. Um, and I will also say that it's our advanced air mobility as well. It's kind of all those things kind of all roll under AAM, but so urban air mobility is we'll just say it's the people vehicles, and then the UAS, the unmanned aerial systems, are the drones essentially. But there's kind of a continuum there, and it's really hard to necessarily define it as one or the other in a lot of cases. So some of the vehicles will start as people vehicles and will become I won't say non-piloted, will become piloted from the ground, not necessarily fully autonomous in like a people carrier, and maybe someday out there in the future, but that's a long vision for sure. But so it's the new experimental. It's the new experimental world. For me, I lovingly call it Aviation 2.0 because it is really just, and people talk about, oh my gosh, it's all this brand new stuff. And it's really not. It's really reapplication of all the things we already know that miniaturization and taking weight out allows us to do. So, using an electric motor to turn a fan isn't new. It's not surprising, right? Battery technology really isn't quite there yet for us to get the ranges that we want. But, it really, the battery technology is kind of what is probably driving it the most, I would say. But the miniaturization of all the stuff, the lightweight composites and all those things to build the vehicles, and the miniaturization, and you look at, like at Honeywell, our fly-by-wire. Fly-by-wire just a few years ago was, a bookcase size piece of equipment. And then it gets really miniaturized, and now it's down to a bookshelf, right? Wow, that's incredible. Well, now what we have is literally a complete fly-by-wire computer is the size of a book. And so to have a triple redundant system is 3 2-pound pieces of equipment, and that's it. You've got a triple redundant fly-by-wire. So I think technologies like that, that's the exciting thing for me. And you can see the excitement. I'm all getting animated and moving around, but and it really is kind of Aviation 2.0, and it's the new experimental for me. So I love the experimental world. I love kind of pushing that envelope, pushing the boundaries, seeing what we could do with what's, what we have. And so this is really the opportunity to keep doing that. And it's super cool that Honeywell is as invested in it as they are, and a really big forward lean. I like to use that terminology a lot, but it's a really forward lean for such a large company, for Honeywell to say, look, we believe in what's really going on here, and we understand it's going to take some time to develop, but we want to help create it. And that's really what Honeywell is doing, and that's a really fun opportunity for me.
Yeah, I can only imagine what it must be like to play in that market. And you guys have a new technology platform that's used for that as well.
Yeah, we've got several great new things. We've got our new avionics, our Anthem avionics suite, which we've got 2 major wins already in our organization, and several more that we're working on, as well as, like I said, fly-by-wire. We've got some radar technology that's just absolutely incredible, in a solid state radar, solid state steerable radar that's got an advanced detect and avoid capability built into it. So it's not a separate computer to do detect and avoid. We actually just shot some new video of 2 drones essentially flying head to head on automated flight plans. Literally would have collided without the radar on one of the aircraft, detecting the other one, and then taking over the flight, detouring around the intruder vehicle, and then rejoining its flight plan, all fully automated.
Wow.
That's just absolutely just really cool technology for me.
Yeah, yeah. Now, it's the thing, I guess, the other side of that is that you and I have been in the aviation world for long enough to see things that get the entire world's excitement around with big, big, bold predictions that the world's going to change, most notably being the very light jet world, when the skies were going to be darkened by VLJs all the time. Remember,
Of
everyone's
course.
going to have personal jets. And now that this idea is that we're going to have, people are just going to walk out into electric powered transportation all over the place, and it's going to be like looking at futuristic movies, and they're just going to be flying everywhere, landing everywhere. What do you think's realistic? Where's the hype versus reality within a reasonable time?
The Jetsons type vision is really easy to sell because everyone can see it and visualize it. They can wrap their head around it. I've seen something like it in movies since forever, right? So that's a really easy way to get people excited about this technology. Do I think we're going to have, a UAM in every driveway in the near future? No, I absolutely don't think that's going to happen. Now, will it eventually? I don't know. I can't say that, right? I think there's huge opportunities with this type of vehicle. So many people are no longer flying in helicopters in the cities where helicopter travel was very prominent. LA, New York, the number of helicopter operations in those areas is down significantly, not because the helicopters are too expensive, but because of the noise problem. The people don't like the noise of the helicopter. So the opportunity with these vehicles is to normalize them and for people to start seeing, oh, it's just an electric helicopter essentially that happens to be able to transition into forward flight in most cases so that it's more efficient. And without the transitioning flight, we're not efficient, we're not fast, and we can't go very far because of the battery technology, right? So a lot of the things that we're doing in this market and as aircraft designers are out of necessity. It's in order to be able to deal with those situations. So I think there is huge opportunity, and yes, I would love one day for us to be able to, ride hail some, urban air mobility vehicle, and I can go from my house in the north end of Phoenix down to downtown Phoenix in a 10-minute Uber ride instead of 45 minutes or an hour, or whatever traffic is at that time. Is that something that's going to happen in the next 5 years or 10 years? No, I don't think it is. I think the real opportunity in the super near future is in the moving of packages. There is huge opportunity, and that's the unseen side. That's not the sexy side of it, right? It's the part that people don't think about. You don't think about that middle mile, and that's what we call it in the package delivery world. You don't think about that middle mile delivery. You don't think about how your package gets from the port to the distribution center that's in your town, right? And a lot of that's done in the air right now, and there are more efficient ways to do that are faster and are better for the planet. So these are opportunities for us to really, really capitalize on that and prove this technology, like we were talking about earlier, get credit for those flight hours. So a lot of these vehicles are being designed so that they can start as package vehicles and then move into people vehicles. Or maybe I'm going to design a vehicle, there's others out there that are saying, all right, rather than saying I'm going to run a ride hailing service, I'm going to run a short haul airline service from Tampa to Orlando, right? Just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's something that's a very time consuming drive, and having a vertical takeoff and landing vehicle in those areas would be hugely beneficial. So I see that as really the near term opportunity for it.
Yeah, and by near term, like you said, we're talking 5-10 years maybe.
Yep.
You could see a lot more happening behind the scenes, a lot more
Yes.
times that you would look up, and not something that you're likely to be in, but you're going to look up and start to see air vehicles going places that are keeping vehicles maybe off the road
Yep.
that would otherwise be on the road, or other types of congestion, and are somehow more efficient.
Yep. Well, and the people on this show, a lot of them are worried about the survival of their local airports, right? I know that's something that we face all the time. And adding these vehicles to the fleet actually helps to keep those airports and revitalize the areas around those airports and all of that sort of stuff. So I think there's huge opportunity with that type of vehicle, utilizing the infrastructure we already have here in the States today. There's lots and lots of airports here today. Now, maybe in other countries there aren't as many, but look at all the little airports that there are around that could be used for people moving that really aren't utilized for that today. And I think there's a great opportunity there.
That's interesting. And you're thinking airports would become part of the hub also for package moving?
They could, absolutely. They certainly could.
Fascinating. Very, very cool. And so
Just my opinion.
I will not mark that as the official opinion of Honeywell. That's
Definitely not the official opinion of Honeywell.
so tell me a little bit then about how Anthem fits into this.
So Anthem is our new avionics kind of package that covers from really general aviation up, and it's really targeted at that continuum. It's designed to be a really expandable and a product that can grow and basically do anything from a VFR only kind of situation up to maybe full Cat 3, Cat 4, auto land, all that sort of capability in larger aircraft one day. So it's really designed to be kind of a backbone type of system where you can say, all right, we have Anthem, that's the avionics, and or vehicle management system if you're talking about in the UAM world. And then we can add in fly-by-wire, and we can add in actuators and all those sorts of things that really kind of build on that backbone.
That's awesome. And where will the average person who wants to go to a show, et cetera, where are we likely to see Andrew Barker next in person at a show?
Well, if
I know I saw
CES
you
happens, if
Cowboy
CES
hat.
happens, I know that's CES isn't a typical aviation show, but it's certainly a technology show. I am planning to be at CES. Honeywell does not have a booth there. I'm just walking that. But there will be, let's see, I will be probably at Sun and Fun, probably not in a work capacity. We'll certainly be at Oshkosh, very likely in a work / personal capacity. You never know. Any kind of a major air show or aviation show event, I will probably be at. So NBAA for sure, and things like that.
Excellent. Well, Andrew, I just want to thank you so much for taking time to join us here on Social Flight Live. It's fascinating. Your background's fascinating. I love any time that we get to spend together, and to be able to share that with everyone and also give them a clue as to where you're going with your career, because it is always to somewhere interesting that we should all be watching.
It's fun. I've been very, very fortunate in the way the world's let me kind of follow this really, really fun, cool pathway through aviation. So I'm honored to be able to be a part of it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate you joining us here tonight on Social Flight Live.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you again for having me.
And to everyone else, I also want to thank you for taking time out of your evening to join us here on Social Flight Live, and for everything you do to support general aviation. We're here for you. We want to continue to do that. I'm going to show this one more time for anyone who's interested, would like to do this. It definitely supports us, but this is the 3D Mustang that we have that's available. That you can see. This is available $49.99, supports Social Flight, and all you have to do is send an email to info@socialflight.com. To all of you, thank you so much for joining us, and I wish you all blue skies.